Hi, statistics students. This is Kim Breeden at Minnesota Online High School. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the assignment Probability of False Positives. Job applicants or student athletes may be asked to take a drug test. In this assignment, you will learn the probability that these tests may be inaccurate. Let's start with some vocabulary. We're going to say that a person uses drugs if they've used a drug during that particular time frame that we are testing. We'll say no drug use if the person has not used drugs during that time. After you take a test, you will get either a positive test or a negative test. A positive result means that it has shown the presence of drugs. A negative test means that it did not show the presence of drugs. Now, unfortunately, sometimes the test can be wrong. A false positive is when a test indicates that there are drugs, even though the person was not using drugs. A false negative is when the test does not indicate there were drugs, when a person was using drugs. A false positive test can be damaging. Imagine being accused of using drugs if you are innocent. This likely makes you wonder how accurate are drug tests. Well, the truth is that this can vary. It depends on what type of test is used, how it was carried out. We might also get different ideas of how accurate the tests are, depending upon who you ask. So the first thing we're going to do is look at a couple different sources and see how that impacts our feelings about the accuracy of the drug test. Keep in mind who is giving us this information. The first source we're going to look at is called Higher Level. Higher Level is a company that provides employment screening to other organizations. In other words, Higher Level gets paid by other businesses to perform drug testing. According to Higher Level, the accuracy of the initial drug screen ranges between 92% to 98%. The accuracy of the GCMS confirmatory test is virtually 100% from a scientific standpoint. With the use of this two-step process and professional accredited laboratories to eliminate human error in the process, there should be no concern regarding the accuracy of drug tests. They also say there is virtually no room for error. Keep this in mind. These tests are highly structured, federally regulated, sophisticated procedures conducted in a certified laboratory. Open up your worksheet and based only on the information from Higher Level, answer question 1A and 1B. After those are done, resume the video. Now let's look at data from a second source, McLean, Benartsky, plus LIT. This is a law firm who specializes in criminal defense. The information I'm going to share comes from a blog written by one of their lawyers. A blog is an article that individuals can write and post to their webpage or a company's webpage. They say low drug testing error rates doesn't necessarily mean most positive tests are accurate. Even though there's only a 1% overall error rate, which seems pretty good, 50% of the positive tests are false positive. That doesn't sound like a very high probability for violating your client's probation or supervised release and putting him or her in prison. Return to your worksheet and answer question 2A and 2B. Now, let's do some mathematical analysis. The probability of getting a false positive depends on the actual test used and the percent of people who actually use drugs. For example, in a population with low drug use, we are more likely to get false positives. In order to do our calculations, we're going to need to make some assumptions so we have numbers to work off of. 9% of working adults have a substance use disorder. This means these people regularly use drugs, and we would assume that they would test positive for drug use. This data is according to the National Safety Council. You can find a link in your worksheet. We could write this as the probability of uses drugs equals 0.09. For these problems, we're also going to assume that a drug test is 99% accurate. So probability of a correct result equals 0.99. Remember, the probability of an event happening plus the probability of an event not happening must equal 100%. This means if 9% of working adults use drugs, 91% of working adults do not use drugs. So the probability of not using drugs equals 0.91. Return to your worksheet and complete question 3A and 3B at this time. So you may now be wondering, what is the probability that you get a false positive? A false positive means that you do not use drugs and you tested positive for the presence of drugs. We would need the probability of both things happening. Remember, to find the probability of multiple events happening, you will multiply the individual probabilities. So, for example, imagine that we wanted the probability that a worker does not use drugs and gets a wrong result. We would multiply the probability that a user does not use drugs times the probability of an incorrect result. Return to your worksheets and finish up number 3. We are now going to use those probabilities you calculated and apply that to a group of 500 people. So in this table, I have taken the probability of a person using drugs and their test results. I've multiplied it by 500 to get the total number of people that we would expect in a company of 500. I left these as decimals just so we can apply it to a larger population if we wanted. So for example, this first number indicates that 44.55 people would use drugs and get a positive test result. Now remember, if we know some information, what we are doing is using conditional probability. So if we are looking at just the people who had positive test results, we would look at only that information on our table. So if a worker gets a negative test, what is the probability that they didn't use drugs? In order to figure this out, I am using conditional probability. I know that this person has a negative test, so I am only using the column for a negative test result. Remember, we would then find probability as the number of desired outcomes divided by the total. But our total would only be the value of 450.9, the total number of people who got a negative test result. On your worksheet, please finish number 4, A through C. And finally, take some time to reflect. You've looked at different data and different opinions. Now it's your turn. Do you think companies should test applicants for drug use? Explain why or why not. Before you submit your assignment, make sure you answered all 5 parts of the questions. I have highlighted these in yellow on your worksheet. Reach out with any questions or if you want to talk more about this. Have a great day.